All right, welcome world of YouTube. Today we're going to be interviewing Beka and doing a Q&A of questions that you have asked on Instagram and other frequently asked questions about acceptance into the Arizona College of Optometry here in Glendale, Arizona. I think it's one of the better schools. I'm pretty biased.
So am I.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first question is, any secret numbers to reach with the application process? Anything you're like, I see that number and definitely you're getting in?
So it's not a definite you're getting in for anything, but potential invite more than likely you could get is at least a 300 on your academic average and total science on your OET, and at least a 3.0 science and overall GPA. So both of those components.
Okay, so you're never completely 100% safe is what I'm getting?
I can't guarantee anybody anything. If I could, I'd be doing a different job.
That's true. So more likely than not, you can get an interview, with 300 OAT, 3.0 GPA, but it's ultimately comes down to the interview,
Yeah,
whether or
the
not
interview component is huge, yes.
to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know. All right, thoughts on a gap year? And if you do a gap year, what can you do in it to make the most of it?
Absolutely. So a gap year is absolutely okay. About 2/3 of the class comes straight from undergrad, and about a third do a gap year. So it's not unheard of. It doesn't set you apart one way or the other. As long as you are doing something still academically, whether you're still studying or you're like taking your OET that year, but also getting optometric experience that year as well. So if you're working, shadowing, it's not like you just stopped going to school and didn't do anything for a year. If you're still in the process of doing something, but take it time and enjoy that year off too, because once you jump into optometry school, it's a ride. So you have a little bit of downtime too to take that little bit of a buffer. But I wouldn't recommend taking too long, no more than a year, just because when you get out of the swing of being in school all the time and then 5 years later trying to jump back into it, it does make it a little bit more difficult.
Okay, that's good. So you can do some soul searching, finding yourself, but make sure you're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So what do you do if you don't get accepted the first time around?
So the application pool is continuing to grow, so there are not enough seats to let everybody in every year. So my recommendation is to always call, find out why. I can look at your file and let you know. You may have applied too late. You may have, even though the deadline's April 1st, we may have been done interviewing in like February. So if your app came through in March, a little too late this year. Kind of a thing sometimes that happens. Maybe you need a higher OET, maybe we need to get you some more science classes, maybe you needed a better letter of recommendation from an optometrist or a personal statement. So that is all something more experience within the optometry world. So that is something we can review and I can look over. So you can definitely reapply, but I can look through your file to let you know what maybe you can improve on.
That's a good point. It's a lot of people I think just don't even put themselves out there enough to communicate. So if you're watching this and you haven't personally emailed or called a school and you're wondering why you haven't gotten in, I guess do that. All right, next one is, are there any extracurriculars in particular that you see and you think, wow, that is an applicant. I am so glad they applied here.
Everybody has a little bit of different that they come in with. So there's not one specifically that makes us go, wow, necessarily. When we're looking at your extracurriculars, we're just looking for something that you spent time investing in. So we kind of talk about a well-rounded applicant as a nice pie cut into nice even pieces. And one of those is extracurriculars, and volunteering and work experience kind of all falls into that. So if you've spent all 4 years in one club or one volunteer area and that's your extracurricular, or if you were an athlete, that's great. That's what you devoted all your time to, and that's fine. We don't want to make sure that you had like 20 different things on your application and only put like 2 hours into each of them because you thought you needed to have all of those. We're looking more for, I picked one and I invested in it and I was able to balance that while going to school. That's what we're looking for. So not specifically one that makes me go, wow. There have been some interesting ones that have come through, and I do want to sometimes meet the applicant because I want to know, what did you exactly do? But for the most part, there's not one specifically, but we want to make sure if you do invest your time in an extracurricular that you are investing in it. You're not just putting it to put it on a resume.
That's a good, I like the analogy of the pie chart, or even slices.
Yes.
All right, and what are your thoughts on having some community college or transferring in your transcript?
So absolutely not a problem, especially with the way finances are these days and how much cheaper community college is than undergrad universities. A lot of people are doing community college and trying to balance that.
I kind of wish I did some community college.
It helped a little bit. Get that through a little bit quicker. Sometimes some of your schools, like there's a school in Southern California that does not offer anatomy at the undergrad. They have to take it through community college. So not a problem. You just want to make sure if you're taking your sciences through the community college, that's where you're strongly getting A's and B's. C's through the community college in your sciences, a little bit more of a red flag. But if you can get those A's and B's, that's not going to hinder it. But know that whatever you do transfer in on your application, all of that gets put together within your GPAs as they go through. The other combination kind of with community college now coming up a lot is online courses and online labs. So we do take them. Some schools don't, so it's something to look at too. If you have the option to take the lab in person, we prefer that just because we do everything in person here. So we want to make sure we're setting you up for success and not failure, but we do accept them.
Okay. Accept, not recommend.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was surprised at how much we do in person. It is. And now with COVID winding down, it's like, of course, but
everything's back in, yeah.
Definitely, I do wish that I would have taken an in-person anatomy lab in college. COVID made me take an online one, which is super easy, but I remember my first few weeks of anatomy were, wow, that was hard.
Yeah, it's a different transition. That's why online is a lot more convenient, absolutely, and with COVID, everything went online, so we understood all of that. But now that everything's going back in person, we highly recommend that, especially for sciences.
Mm-hmm. What number is too low for shadowing?
So I would say anything under 20 hours, just because every day in an optometry office is going to be different. Every patient that comes in is going to be different. So if you have at least, over 20 hours, that means you've been almost 3 full days in an office. You've seen kind of the gamut that comes through, and not every day is going to be the same. So you get that variety, but obviously the more competitive it is on your application to have that shadowing. But the other component of having more than 20 hours of shadowing is that the optometrist has gotten to get to know you, and they write you a very nice letter of recommendation. So that's where it's twofold. So if you only spend 2 hours with them, they can't really talk a whole lot about you. So that's why, and you've not really seen the profession either. So do you really know what you're getting into? So recommend doing more than 20.
Okay, I like that, where it's 20 hours is only just 3 working days as an optometrist. That's nothing. Now that I think of it, I know I had low shadowing hours, but does that kind of balance out if you've worked in the field and stuff? Okay.
Yes. So when we're looking at your optometry experience, we're looking at a combination of whether you shadowed, you volunteered, you worked, whether you worked front desk or optician or behind the scenes, whatever it was. So as long as you've had exposure to the profession, so you kind of understand and have seen it from different vantage points, that's what we're looking for. Okay.
Sweet. And then going down a little bit to a different question that really has to do with this. Is there any considerations, is there anyone that you view better versus internship in an office, shadowing a doctor, or being employed by a doctor?
So they don't have preference one over the other as far as like a ranking order. But if you were to obviously be employed at the office, you're going to have a little bit more free reign. You might see a few more things. If you're just shadowing, you might not be able to be in the full patient base of everything just because of all the lovely laws. And then patient comfortability on that. I think I just made up a word. But how do you feel about that? But it's one of those things. So obviously you're going to see different things on those different levels. But do we say, oh, this one shadowed and this one fully worked there, so we're going to take the one that worked there over the one that shadowed? No.
Okay.
It's more, again, it's back to that exposure, and as much exposure as you get before you get here just helps you have a greater understanding once you're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know the only thing I'd say is when I was got a job with an optometrist, that's when it became serious for me. So it's probably the intangible things about working for a doctor that are better. Maybe a better letter of recommendation too. But that's nice to know. Very good. All right. Any competitive advantage that you see between different majors?
So We take any major, but obviously something that's science-based or pre-health is going to help you cover all of your science prerequisites.
Okay.
So that's usually part of that realm. Your biology major, your pre-med major, bios, chems, anatomy, all is going to be included in your curriculum to graduate. If you're a music major or psychology major, you're going to have to take science classes in addition to all of your major coursework. So it can be done. It's not one way or the other is better. We have music majors, we have psych majors, we have people with come in with business. Yeah. So it's not one specific area, but it just adds more to your caseload. Your course load just depends on that. So one doesn't preferential treatment over the other. It just helps you not have as many classes to take in undergrad.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm super grateful. When I realized this, well, I knew that you didn't have to be a science major, and so I was like, sweet, I'm just going to major in Spanish. And then that was going to take me 5 years to do, because at my university, Spanish was a hefty major because, I don't know, I think they were screening for people who already knew it, so they just made it hard that even if you knew Spanish, it would be hard to major in it. But 5 years, and then when I sat down and looked at it, all of the prereqs were literally in this microbiology major. And instead of taking 5 years in undergrad, it only took me 3 years in undergrad. And so that's 2 years of being an optometrist that I saved. Don't know what that had to do with, now that I think of it. But yeah, some majors might be better, but all are accepted.
Yes.
All right. So what goes on behind the scenes between applying and being accepted? I know some of you out there have waited and are waiting and will wait a while before hearing back. So what's going on behind the scenes?
So once you submit your application with Optometry, it takes about a week to 3 weeks, depending on where they're at in the process, to get it to you as opt. So once we have it here in-house, we do everything electronically, so you get all those notifications. In order to complete your application, we require your application, your letters of recommendation, and your test scores.
Okay.
So once it moves to the complete process, that's when I begin the review process. I go through, clear your prerequisites, then pull out all the information that I know the admissions committee is looking for, and then I make my recommendation. It's then decided by the committee what they want to do with, if they want to invite for an interview, place on the wait list. There's a hold before category. So if you happen to note that you're planning to retake your OAT in like 2 months, we might put you on the hold before instead of move you through the process until we get the new scores. And there's unfortunately the deny category as well. So those are the categories that go through. So that's kind of how it moves through that process. So if you're moved into the invite category, then you're invited to schedule your interview. And depending on when you schedule that, determines how long you will know. Like, so if you schedule your interview 2 weeks from now, you'll usually know within 2 weeks after your interview date what your status is, if you've been accepted or not.
Okay, so the committee meets every other week, and then
Ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ish. Okay.
Ish, but yes. So, but we do move pretty quickly through the
Okay.
process. Once your application's complete, you could know within 3 to 5 days
Oh.
if you've been accepted and invited to interview, and then after an interview within 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay,
Mhm.
That's good. That's great. That's not as long. I feel like it feels like forever when you're on the receiving end of that.
It does.
I know I was like checking my email every day and like, did it go to spam?
That is something to check, because
Oh.
sometimes Midwestern emails go to spam for some random reason. So check. Check
You're
that
like,
spot too.
Why didn't this person say yes?
Yes, and if it's been, if you feel like it's been a couple of weeks and you're like, I feel like I should have some notification, email, call, we'll let you know.
You don't bite, right?
We don't bite.
Very.
I try not to bite.
That's good. Okay, 2 more questions. Do I have a better chance of getting in if I have years of experience in the field?
So experience, kind of going back to that pie we talked about, experience is one section of that. So even if you have 10 years of being an optician, being in the field, teching, whatever it might be, absolutely you're going to have probably a leg up when you get into your clinicals, but not necessarily when you're doing the academic side of it, because you've been out of school for a while possibly. So you may struggle more in the first 2 years. So it's not necessarily because you have more experience over someone who doesn't that we're going to take you over someone else. Again, it's back to that balance of we want to see a well-rounded applicant. Experience, academics, those kind of things as we're looking through.
Okay. And so I've seen a lot of people who have like parents who are optometrists in optometry school, which like I would have loved to have. that kind of letter of recommendation. No, it can't be a family.
They can't write that letter.
But is there anything in particular that, like, if you have family in optometry, that gives you a competitive advantage?
No.
Okay. So that's just
not
they
for
want
us
it
anyway.
All right. All right, and then so the last one that was sent in was, what personally makes you look at an applicant and go, "Wow, I want this person"?
I don't think it's one thing in particular. I think it's a combination, like seeing. I'm gonna go back to that pie, but that perfectly cut pie, perfectly baked, to where you have very strong academics, you have great test scores, you have incredible letters of recommendation, you have great shadowing, working hours, you've been doing a couple other things while you're going to school. So, and your personal statement. That can usually add to an application, to where sometimes that personal statement is the first part of your application, where it's not just a preset, fill everything out. We get to know you. And so when you write that out and you've given me your story, it doesn't have to be, biopic, but it does. That's our first glimpse. And sometimes that is the wow factor, is you telling me why you want to do this. So
I'm glad I spent a lot of time on my personal statement. I think I looked back and I was like, why did I spend a lot of time on that? But
no, our faculty do read it before they interview you too, so it's part of the interview day process.
That's good to know. All right, I was also wondering about that. So, extra question, if I may, about that pie. There are definitely some things where, like, let's say shadowing was a part of pie you need to work on. That is super easy to just, in 3 days, you could have shadowed 20 more hours. But let's say GPA, or, test score, you can retake an exam or go take the GRE if you have to. But GPA, how have you seen people improve that piece of the pie?
So there's a couple different ways. Sometimes it's your overall, because your major wasn't science and you discovered science later, and your science GPA is great, but your overall is not so great.
Okay.
Like that kind of, we look at that too. But usually it is the science side, and so that's kind of where people struggled. Or, your freshman year, gotcha. Because unfortunately everything goes in, even when you do retake. So that's the other component to it. So even though you retook everything and you rocked it, it's still affecting all the way through. And the more credits you take, the harder it is to climb out of that hole. So that's when I usually recommend doing like a science-based master's degree.
Okay.
And we have one here that we recommend, and then there's some other ones on the other schools have that are just as great.
Oh yeah, I think I know someone who wants to go into optometry from the biomedical science degree.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's great because it's kind of similar to what your first year of basic science is as an optometry student. So you get that foundation, and so it's a twofold part when it comes to that master's. It helps to improve your science GPA. So whether it's ours or somewhere else, you want to make sure it's science-based. So
that's
it's helping
a lot of credits
both
too,
GPAs. Right? And the other aspect is because it's graduate level coursework, it's showing that you can be successful in that. So when you do, obviously undergrad and graduate are very different levels. And so that's one of the other things. So if it's that master's level, then it's showing that you can do and be more successful in that area.
Okay. Had people who come to do the science program at Midwestern, but then go to other school to get accepted? Cool.
Yep. That is what our biomed program is kind of set up for. It helps with any, like DO, dental, optometry, and so people will come here and they can go to other schools. They don't have to stay here.
Oh, that's really cool. A little bit more debt, but then you get into school.
Yep.
That's good. All right, so final question is, what would your one application hack be? Like, not like necessarily give you a competitive advantage on what's in your application, but something you do with it that...
Applying early would be probably the biggest key component. Even though we have a deadline and people are used to being, when you're in school, I have until 10 o'clock to get my paper submitted, so I wait till 9:59. When it comes to submitting your application for optometry school, waiting until the deadline is actually very detrimental. So OptumCast always opens that last week of June for the next cycle. So applying within the first 4-5 months at the most is much better application chances than waiting until the April 1st deadline to submit. And because we do operate on that rolling admission. So we review, we interview, we accept as we go. So you may be an absolute stellar candidate, but if we don't get your application until April 10th, after you submitted April 1st and we're done interviewing, we got nothing for you. So we don't have that spot to possibly do even if we wanted to. So because you waited too long. So getting it in early, and with that, staying on top of your letter writers, because that can hold up an application for months.
That did.
I had to bug you about your letter, so to see if they're going to submit it or not.
I didn't know they didn't submit until, because it was out of my hands.
Exactly. You sent the email, you expected them to be able to do it, and you didn't realize they weren't. So unless you're checking your Optomcast to see where that application system is at, and what they might be waiting on, it can hold up your application for 6 months, depending on if you didn't realize they didn't get it.
Yeah. So go bug people professionally.
Yes.
And then that also, if you apply early, you can contact and see what you did wrong. And if it's a test score, you can just
have a chance to
retake the OAT right there, you know, if you took it early enough. So don't wait until after, like winter break would be the last time I would take the OAT, because then you can retake it. So take it in the summer if you have to, maybe winter break, and then one more time.
Yep.
Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you need to. Or GRE.
Yeah, we do the GRE, the
More
MCAT,
GREs.
DAT.
Okay. Yeah, have you been seeing a lot more number of people who apply with those?
We have a wide variety coming in this year. I think we have every exam.
Well, thank you so much, Beka, for coming on. And if you ever need to contact Beka about anything, go ahead, because that's the number one thing to do is contact schools, be open. Don't want something and not communicate it. If you want to come here, let Beka know, even if you're a first year in college. I remember I emailed you my first year and I was like, I want to come here.
Yep.
And you can get on the right track.
Yep.
So, and that's one thing I don't know, this is gonna make it in the video or not, but I was super grateful that I contacted you so early, because you were like, oh yeah, but you need, like, don't forget about shadowing. And I was like, I haven't even shadowed.
Yeah.
That's what got me to get a job or to shadow and then to get a job with that doctor, and got me super passionate about optometry. So I have you to thank for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Well, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Yeah.
All right.